Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand spanking new episode of the Consulog. We have a great episode for you today, most of all because this is episode number 50.
Woo!
Whoa! Don't want to blow out your headphones, but yeah, that's 50 episodes of the Consulog. Uh, if you've been a long-time listener, thank you. If you've been a short-time listener, thank you. If you aren't listening, I don't care about you, and you'll never hear me say that because you're not listening. That's
Exactly.
just
So
kind of how
you
it
can
goes.
just go off in your not listening world.
Yeah, just go into a wall. That's what I do. This is episode 50 of the Consulog, August 22nd through August 28th. It's been over a year, the Consulog. Thank you so much. Let me also introduce the host as guest host as well. Matthew Gersman is here again. So happy to have him back.
Yep, I'm here. I've already chimed in, so I don't even know where.
That's good. I just want to make sure. Well, for those who don't see and they just hear with their eyes, then nope. If they hear with their ears, then they'll be able to know that you're here.
If
So
you
that's always
see
good
with your ears, it's called synesthesia.
It's a sin when you have anesthesia. Sure.
No, I don't think it is.
No, that's true.
I think it's medically necessary.
Yeah, that's good. So I want to also start off the episode by saying we have a new community online. If you want to get together with other console loggers, it's on Spectrum.chat, where you can. It's kind of like Reddit, which is an easy way to explain it, but it's mostly geared towards tech. There's a new community for the console log there, so I'm there. I'm happy to say hello. Matthew's there. We're happy to chat with you if you're there and let us know what you think about the episodes. If you have any suggestions on what you want to have change, what other things you want to have be included, please do let us know, because the more you say hello, the more we can say hi.
Also, very exciting, we have a few members that we don't even know. I haven't met these people. I don't know if you have, Harry.
I barely have met myself, so starting off on a very low baseline. That is the intro spiel, so without anything else being said, let's start talking about the news. So, first things first, everybody's favorite little framework is not so little anymore. Node.js has now hit more than 1 billion downloads. That's billion with a capital B that rhymes with P, that stands for programming.
Yeah, it's crazy. I remember, how old is Node now? 5 years?
No, it's definitely older than that.
Is it? We're gonna Google Live Node.js.
Who's gonna be the first? I did Node.js Wiki, and it was the first initial release was 9 years ago.
2009, so it's 9 years. So I remember first hearing about Node in like 2013, 2014, and
Yeah.
just being like, at the time I was writing PHP because I knew what I was doing, and I was just like why would you want to run JS on the server? And then I met Harry, and Harry was like, no, this is why you want to run JS on the server, and then I learned everything.
Yes, and now 1 billion people have as well. So we are in good, massive company, because that is just a large number. As it says in the blog post, it's part of the Triple Comic Club, the 3 Comic Club, which is not something that I'm personally part of, but maybe one day. Hopes and dreams.
I'd like to bet that you've made a billion jokes by now.
That is for damn sure.
Not a billion good jokes, just a billion jokes.
I mean, if I made 1 billion good jokes, then I'm definitely in the wrong career, because that is just money being burnt up in the air. But yeah, definitely 1 billion bad jokes. Bad dad jokes. Bad jokes. One of those two. Moving right along. In other news, the not little known, but I'm always surprised who hasn't heard about. There's this blogging platform called Ghost, and the big thing that I find interesting and exciting about this, it's actually been around for quite a while. I would say around 4 or 5 years, and it's pretty much WordPress written entirely in Node.js and JavaScript. So if you want, it's open source, so you can host it yourself. You can also use their paid hosting services as well. And why we're talking about it right now is that Ghost version 2.0 was just released this past week with a whole host of new features. So what is it? They say the short version is that there's a new editor, there's multi-language support, there's custom routes, there's custom site structures, and content collections are now all built in. Ghost prides itself on trying to be as lean as possible to focus just on the writing, whereas WordPress kind of grew to this CMS thing kind of backwards, whereas Ghost tries to be focused on just being a blogging system. But this is definitely a step towards being a little bit more flexible. So it's definitely, opening their eyes to different use cases. But I actually used to run my blog on Ghost for a long time. I actually helped contribute in the open source community, which was fun as well. But it's a new feature. I haven't tried it out yet. But if you do like that, hands-on approach of WordPress, Ghost is definitely a good alternative to Go as well.
I'm going to be honest, the only Ghost I'm really familiar with is Casper, and I don't even have one of their mattresses, so I have almost nothing to add of value to this conversation, but I'm excited that people are releasing software.
That's always good. Speaking of releasing software, Matthew, great thing to mention. There is another blogging, it's not really a blogging software, it's a static site generator called Gatsby, which I've talked about in the past, I'm pretty sure, because the console log website itself is written with Gatsby. They released their first RC for version 2.0, and this has been after many betas. If I actually check the page, they were on beta 113.
Wow.
That's what you call beta-driven development, or BDD for short.
Yeah. I would call it 113 driven development. So
It's over 100%. Gatsby's awesome. Definitely encourage you to try it out. The RC is going to be very stable because after 113 beta releases, you should feel somewhat confident that they found most of the bugs.
I hope so.
I mean,
Now,
I think what they're mostly working on now is just documentation to make sure that the upgrade experience is as pleasant as possible, and the first time onboarding experience is also as pleasant as possible. So it's them being, most software that you see nowadays, they write it, they release it, documentation is an afterthought. Gatsby, that is not the case. This is them definitely being, that's a first thing. I don't know what the word is.
It's kind of cool, first class citizen.
Thank
It's kind
you.
of cool. It's kind of cool that they are considering that a requirement for releasing, as though like RC is like, okay, we're feature complete now. We're bug complete. Let's make it feature complete.
Right. I mean, for these big open source projects, to have that be more of a first class concern is definitely going to make both an end user's experience more pleasant and also the maintainer's experience more pleasant, because rather than saying, oh, let me write about how to fix this, they say, oh, this is where I already wrote about fixing it.
You know what? You know what has even more than 113 versions?
What is that?
The next thing we're going to talk about.
Oh, it sounds like something that would be bug ridden, though.
I don't know. It's a little. It's not quite. It's not so intimidating though. It's not like it's Godzilla.
No, but it's a combination of the two. It is Bugzilla. Bugzilla. Bugzilla, one of the first bug tracking systems that I ever used, my second job, is 20 years old. That is older than one of my brothers. It's a very old piece of software, and in this,
It can almost drink.
it can almost drink, and I think after using it, you would want to, because it has definitely been outdated. I mean, there's a tweet that I have linked in the show notes that you can click on that Bugzilla is outdated, but they're trying to actually bring UX enhancements to it, because in its core, Bugzilla is a very powerful bug tracking system. Just the skin on top isn't as powerful.
You know, let's just write a Bugzilla Jira Trello integration, just so that way everyone can use what they want.
And then we have ways to actually track when we have more bugs there.
Yeah, and for the one person that wants to connect over IRC, they can do that too.
There's always that one. And then what else is old, Matthew?
You know what else is old is my preferred browser that no one tests on, and the engine it's built on.
Oh yeah, yeah. Is it like a Kit Kat bar?
It's more like an adventure.
A Safari, if you will.
Yeah, a Safari. I do use Safari as my main browser, and people just don't like testing on Safari, so the web is constantly broken for me, and I just file bugs with my engineer friends that work at those companies. But anyway, WebKit had its first commit 17 years ago on August 24th, and as many of you know, WebKit is the engine that powers Safari, and this is pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's also, WebKit in many ways was what brought about the onset of modern browsers, because WebKit was a fork of a Linux browser called KHTML. So it was KHTML, then it became WebKit. WebKit is what was used for many years by both Chrome and Safari. So it's actually Apple that was trailblazing this path. And WebKit was powering Chrome and Safari. And then until I think 4 or 5 years ago, Google said, no, we want more control. And they actually forked WebKit into their own browser engine called Blink. So WebKit's still used by Safari, but now Blink powers Chrome. But without WebKit, most of us would not have the same types of jobs that we have today.
Yeah. Before WebKit, people were running IE on a Mac, which is what we were talking about last time.
Yeah, and I mean, it's 17 years old, which makes sense because it definitely still acts like a teenager. So
That is true. Sometimes it does act like a teenager. It was released with OS 10 Jaguar.
wow.
I'm pulling up the original Apple press release. That's what they're called. Anyway, this is great. It required a minimum of 128 megs of RAM.
Could you imagine if that was a requirement today? What would an engineer say? 128? They just laugh you out of the room.
Yeah, I mean, like, you can't even run Slack on like 128 gigs, let alone 128 megs.
It's sad but true, but I still love Slack and all the people there. And speaking of browsers, because we are talking about WebKit, which is a browser engine, one of my favorite editors is VS Code, a awesome editor by the folks at Microsoft. And
I didn't realize people were still making other editors.
it's one of those things where it's just like everyone makes their own to-do list. I think at some point every company makes their own editor.
Well, VS Code is winning, but anyway, continue.
Thank you. So VS Code is an editor. It's my go-to editor of choice. And there's this other website called Code Sandbox. And Code Sandbox is similar to JS Fiddle, CodePen, where you can write an application in the browser. Code Sandbox is awesome. It essentially is powered by Webpack and just it makes it feel like you have an entire ID, like an entire VS Code editor in the browser. And what's interesting is that this past week, the creator and founder of Code Sandbox was actually able to get VS Code itself, which is an Electron application. It uses Node APIs, get that entire VS Code application to run in the browser. He was able to shim certain APIs that were Node only to make it shimmed for the browser, but he had the entire VS Code application running in the browser, which is both a compliment towards the VS Code team for making the code so modular and easy to be able to be ported over, and also the ingenuity of Ives, I believe is his name, to get that actually running in Code Sandbox. I mean, could you imagine Sublime Text 2 running in the browser?
Yeah, no. And this is just like, first of all, code in the browser is insane. Like, I want to make an Inception joke, but I want to actually talk about how impressive this is, both technically and for the future of tech. Like, if you look at Chromebooks right now, which are floating around, like, they've made VS Code into a web application. So it's like, and this is a great proof of concept for converting. We have a lot of things that can turn a web app into an Electron app, but what about the reverse, which Ives has figured out? So props to you, dude.
That's actually an interesting thought. How could there be a project that makes it easier to go Electron to the browser?
Yeah,
you're right.
Reverse.
Yeah, but you're right. No, because most applications are browser to Electron because you want that desktop feel. But what if you want to go in the opposite? Like that's pretty neat. That's an interesting project idea. If anybody wants to work on that, because I don't have the time. And then speaking of the browser, I'm sure that VS Code in the browser isn't as fast as it is in Electron because you're limited mostly to one thread in the browser because JavaScript is single-threaded. But there is, a thing called web workers. But the problem with a web worker is that
they don't work hard enough.
They don't work hard enough. They are not up to the snuff that Spider-Man demands.
Exactly.
I think we talked about this last week, but there's a new API coming to Chrome called OffscreenCanvas. And the limitation, one of the biggest limitations of web workers, which is why I think most UI engineers don't use them, is that web workers can't touch any UI things. Can't touch the DOM, can't touch the DOM's, I think, pretty much the biggest one that you have to worry about. But there's this new API that is called OffscreenCanvas, and this is for usage for Canvas applications. If you do like 3JS and other things, that will actually let you interact with, manipulate, update a canvas element in a web worker, and then be able to offload drawings to a web worker to potentially speed up the rendering of your applications. And I'm not going to dwell on this too much because we talked about it in the previous episode. There's a huge in-depth article about it from the Google developer blog. But I want to move on to, so an Off-screenCanvas is available without a flag in Chrome 69. So right now Chrome's stable is 68, so it's coming as stable in the next version. It's also in development in Firefox, so it's trying to be cross-platform compatible. So this is a thing that you can actually rely on.
There's one particular thing I wanna draw attention to before we move on to the next topic, which is similar, which is why we're trying to get to it. But there's this one line in the article, which is because its API is very aligned with the regular Canvas element, you can easily feature detect it and use it as a progressive enhancement. So it's really cool that not only does this thing run in a separate thread, but you can easily just not worry about that if that feature is not available in whatever browser you're supporting, like Safari.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like they're working on it yet, sadly. However, something that is even more exciting than Off-screenCanvas to me, which is not that hard to do, quite honestly, because I get very excited. But
you are an excitable person.
I am quite excitable. There's a new project that was just announced at JSConf US this past week from the AMP team at Google. AMP, which is the team that makes the AMP pages, and it's a new project called WorkerDOM, and it is an implementation of the DOM API intended to run within a web worker. And the implications of this are sweet.
Yeah, this removes the primary constraint around multi-threaded JavaScript, and if we see this happening, it'll be really impressive. A few years ago, Harry and I were at a conference where we saw an implementation of a virtual DOM within a web worker. Harry, I don't know if you remember which talk I'm about to bring up, but it was, I forget the name of the talk, but it was filled with Kirby's, and as in Kirby the video game. And if you go to Pokedex.org, you can see the fastest website on the internet because all of its rendering is done in a web worker, in a virtual DOM. So this is the next step of this thing that we saw a couple of years ago, where now there is a actual DOM in the web worker that we can transfer back.
Yeah, so they had a whole presentation at JSConf US. I'm dying to watch the presentation to see them talk about it, but they have the slides posted so you can get a preview of them. And one of the slides that's talking about the original requirements for this project, and supposedly the original requirements was, hey Chris, make it so that React works in a web worker. And that was the full list of requirements, and saying a lot with a little. So this project is making most of the DOM available to your web worker. So that means that most of your favorite frameworks, such as React, Angular, Ember, could potentially, with minor modifications, work in a web worker and then leverage this library to then offload computationally heavy chores to the web worker and free up the UI to never have any lag. I'm very excited about this. They're still working on it. It's not ready for production. They're talking about how there are some limitations that they can work around, such as like if there's any DOM APIs that provide synchronous access, web workers work over an asynchronous bridge, so those are kind of tricky to figure out an alternative. There's other things that are hard to even have an alternative implementation, like prevent default and stop propagation, which are synchronous methods that to have that be done over an asynchronous bridge will be a little tricky. But you know, what I find also funny about this is that this project came out of the desire of the AMP team to be able to have AMP pages run arbitrary JavaScript. So it's not that their goal was to make React work in a web worker. It was that in an AMP page, you have a very strict sandbox of what you can actually use. They have their own implementation of a carousel, all these things to make sure that sites never lag, they're always fast. And part of that is making sure that when you run arbitrary JavaScript, it's also in the sandbox, so there's no worry about it slowing down any of the UI. So that's kind of where this came from, but kind of as the approach they took is a nice generic one, which allows for the wider web community to get value from. So appreciate that, but it's definitely early days. I'm sure we'll see more talks about this as it gets closer because it's very, very exciting.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I think this will dramatically improve perf on most of the web.
Yeah. And then speaking of frameworks like React, JavaScript, Angular, JavaScript, JavaScript's the framework, React, Angular, Ember. Another one, which is a very large framework, is Vue.js. And there was actually a very lovely article from Wired.com, a very large tech magazine, like an actual print magazine in the US, that had a whole in-depth expose about Vue.js, how essentially there's one developer that created Vue.js, that maintains Vue.js, and it's going up against the big guns like React, Angular, and Ember.
Yeah,
And
I'm not. I could be wrong, but I feel like there are Vue has a pretty big team behind it. We've talked about them in the past, and I know that they have a few contributors that they list on their site.
they may, but there's definitely one sole main architect.
Right,
If you
I
look
know
at
Evan. Yeah, I know Evan Yu is the founder, and well, it's not a company, but the author, if you will.
Yeah, I mean,
Anyway,
I think it's I mean, compared to a fully funded team like Angular and React, which is like 6 full-time software engineers that work on that exclusively,
sure.
uh, and also they've had many years to do that as well. And I think there's one takeaway from the article that I really liked. It was saying that, and I'm not sure how true this is because again, this is written for a more wider audience. So they have to make things simpler, but they're saying that a big reason for Vue success is its simplicity. So that most companies that want to build web applications like Google Docs, most companies need complicated requirements because they're making Google Docs or Facebook. However, most developers only want a framework for building small interactive web apps. So Angular or React could be overkill for simple applications, whereas Vue.js has a nice layered approach to building a framework. I've tried Vue a little bit. One of my biggest hesitations to Vue was actually its template syntax, because I've been burned in the past when I was interacting with Angular's templates because the debugging information for that was horrible. It was just useless. It was garbage. So I was like, templates suck, never can be good. And then I tried it with Vue.js and I had an error in my template. And it was like, here's the error. I get pointed directly to the line, to the column and row. And I was like, here's the error. This is what you got to do to fix it. And I was like, oh shit, that's pretty nice.
That's dope. I highly recommend this article for some non-Vue reasons. It's actually very cool to see a JavaScript article explained in a less technical environment. So Wired is primarily a gadget magazine, I would say. I don't know if Harry, if you might agree. They cover like gadgets and software on the web. So this line I just find hilarious. The big question is whether Vue can sustain developer interest. The browser-side programming ecosystem is notoriously turbulent, with libraries and frameworks frequently rising and falling in popularity. It wasn't long ago that an older project called Backbone was by far the most popular JavaScript framework, and Angular and React were the insurgents. So it's kind of cool to see them explaining like the things that we discuss every day to the general tech world.
Yeah, I agree. It's cool. It validates our jobs. And then to round off this episode, I'm introducing a new segment which may change its name. It may not be here every time, but I just thought it'd be fun to just kind of name it. It's called What's Neat?
And while we're talking about things that are neat, I have a dad joke that I want to make this episode, Harry.
Okay.
So I don't know if I've told you, I've been trying to eat less red meat, so I've started cooking it because the meat is less red.
Yep. That's a tender joke right there.
It is tender because the meat is less. Well, if the meat is less red, then it's not so tender.
There's another joke I had about what do you call I'm gonna butcher it, so I'm not even gonna worry about it. Anyways, what's neat? I got 2 things. We got 2 things for you this week. One, there was a fun application made where a developer created Windows. They made Windows 95 run on Electron. That's kind of it.
Yeah, and you can download it, and it just works. Although IE crashes the moment you load it, so you can't run IE within Electron. But you can play Solitaire, which I did, And people are like, why are you playing solitaire at your desk? And I was like, I'm researching for this podcast. It totally counts as work.
So if you want to play, if you miss Windows 95 in all of its glory, it runs on Mac, Linux, and Windows, so you can run Windows 95 on your Windows 10 machine, even though Windows 95 is a higher number than Windows 10, but try to explain that to anybody else.
Yeah, you know why they skipped Windows 9, right?
Why was that?
They were worried about so much software out there that checks if like the OS name begins with Windows 9, whatever, because 95, 98.
That's amazing.
So they had to jump to 10.
You know, the best laid plans of mice and men. And the second fun thing this week, Matthew, you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, it's MagicPiano, different from Magic Mouse or other Magic Tech products. This is a piano in your web browser. And the thing that makes it particularly nifty is you just go on this website and it opens a WebSocket and you just start playing piano with strangers. And I just loaded the page. I'm seeing people playing. And I'm going to play the song Damn It by Blink-182 because I know how to play that. And it's just not going to matter because people are still pling their own music. But yeah,
this is fun. By the prolific Sarah. Sarah, I've never said your name actually out loud. It's Vieira? I don't know. I love talking with Sarah on Twitter, and she's going to yell at me that I don't know how to say her last name, so I apologize in advance. But always love the fun. Oh, I like the license. It's the What the Fuck PL license. That's so good.
What? Tell us about that license.
I want to keep this episode non-explicit.
I think you've already made it explicit, but it pretty much says do whatever you want to, and then it's a little sarcastic from there. Just a little.
Well, when you have a MagicPiano, I think you're granted a few liberties. And that is episode number 50. 50 episodes. Do join the Spectrum community. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you want to be notified when there is a new YouTube channel, do hit the little bell that lets you enable alerts for it on there. And definitely reach out on Twitter if you have any things of excitement that you want to share with us. We're always happy to hear about it.
Yeah, when you follow me on Twitter, it validates me. I feel good about myself. Like, that's pretty much all I can do for my self-esteem. So please help me out.
And thank you for being a listener. And we should hear from you again next week. Matt?
Thanks for having me, Harry. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Any last words of excitement?
I already used up my dad joke of the episode for the red beat thing, and that one landed tremendously. I'm sure all of our listeners will find it hilarious.
Hopefully, and let us know by the time we record again. Bye!